At the far end of Bagram Air Logistics Hangar 7, where the concrete slabs cracked from decades of weight and silence, the air held a scent of oil, rust, and forgotten stories. Here, aircraft that once broke sound barriers now sat inert, wings shrouded in dust, tails labeled with decommissioned tags that fluttered like quiet flags in the draft. This hangar wasn't where you found glory. It was where old metal went to sleep. Maya Alvarez, age 29, showed up at 05:55 every morning. Her uniform was always sharp, though her boots carried a gray outline from the decades of grime embedded in the floor. She never wore earrings, never left her hair loose. It was always tucked into a tight, low bun that didn't shift under her ballistic-rated ear protection. Those who worked near her said she moved like a mechanic in a shadow. Nobody knew much about her beyond the basics. She held an AFSC in aircraft structural maintenance, was born in El Paso, and had served 2 overseas deployments in logistics support. At just over 5 feet, Maya often disappeared between engines and airframes, especially when she wore her black coveralls and carried the grease-stained red toolkit marked a 317. Around the hangar, she picked up the nickname Phantom Wrench. Most mechanics in Hangar 7 rotated through whatever came in from boneyards or crash investigation returns. Maya didn't rotate. She requested only one zone, and the NCOs let her have it. Zone Delta 3 was where the X-92 Phantom Hawk sat, covered in tarps, fenced by yellow tape, and flanked with multilingual warning signs. Some said it was an experimental stealth platform from 2004. Others joked it was a Cold War prank that nobody had ever bothered to trash. No one else touched it, but Maya treated it like it was still on active duty. Each morning, at exactly 6 o'clock, she removed the corner of the tarp, exposing the starboard intake panel. She logged temperature, surface moisture, and canopy integrity into a leather-bound notebook with duct tape on the spine. If the humidity shifted by even a fraction, she made a new entry. Her hand would hover over the composite skin, as if reading it by feel. She never used gloves when inspecting the Phantom Hawk. Most assumed she was just quirky. A few thought she was wasting time. One corporal once asked why she kept looking at a jet nobody wanted. She didn't reply. She just nodded, zipped her coveralls up to the collar, and resumed scanning for microfractures along the airframe like they mattered. To her, they did. There was something in the way she walked around the X-92, slow and methodical, checking redundant systems as if preparing it for flight that would never come. While others looked at it like debris, Maya saw a presence. She never spoke to the aircraft, but there was a rhythm in how she moved around it, like a dance rehearsed 1,000 times with a partner that never forgot the steps. The jet's profile was still sharp, a blended wing body that looked decades ahead of its time. Its intake sat flush against the fuselage, its sensor modules sealed under hardened covers. The landing gear struts, though locked and unpowered, bore no sag. And while the flight systems had long since been deemed inactive, Maya checked the diagnostic ports like someone expected them to blink to life again. She never took selfies, never uploaded anything to social. Her connection to the X-92 wasn't about exposure. It was about something older, something heavier. Every time she logged an entry, she did so without speaking a word, her handwriting steady and compact. Others in the hangar began to notice. Not the officers, not yet, but the enlisted. A senior airman once said she looked like she was keeping vigil. Another called it a ghost watch. The aircraft hadn't moved in 20 years, and she acted like it might breathe if she waited long enough. Maya never asked for special access. She had a Tier 2 badge like everyone else in her unit. But somehow, every tool she used fit the bolts on that frame. Every sensor reader she pulled from storage matched the ports. She claimed it was coincidence. The truth felt different. In the break room, others laughed about her silent rituals. They joked that maybe the Phantom Hawk was cursed, or maybe Maya was trying to bring it back to life like some sci-fi movie. She never reacted. She drank her coffee in silence and was always the first to clock back in. By 17 o'clock, she'd be the last to leave. The tarp would be back in place, sealed tight. The caution tape reset. The notebook zipped inside her chest pocket. And the aircraft, still unmoving, sat like a relic from a time the Air Force chose to forget. But Maya hadn't forgotten, and every small act she made inside that hangar whispered something most people never heard. It wasn't just steel she was tending to. It was memory. And maybe, just maybe, it was still listening. Maya began every day in the same way. She arrived before the lights came up in Hangar 7, long before the hum of forklifts or the hiss of hydraulic lines echoed between the steel beams. At exactly 6 o'clock, she logged the exterior temperature from the tarmac display and wrote it down in her notebook beside the name she never said out loud, Phantom Hawk. Humidity came next. She used a calibrated sensor from her kit, one she'd tuned by hand until it gave consistent readings no matter the shift in airflow. She checked 3 zones: forward fuselage, port engine intake, and the underbelly composite seam, where 2 alloy plates met. If any area registered more than 2% variance from the baseline she'd recorded months ago, she made a note with a thin black pen. Her handwriting was clean, no cursive, all caps. The notebook had its own smell by now: old ink, graphite dust, jet fuel. She kept it inside a canvas sleeve that zipped closed with a plastic tab, the kind used in cold weather flight suits. She didn't keep it in her locker. It never left the hangar. Her hands moved with practiced stillness, fingers calloused from years of engine work but gentle as she tapped the sensor housing against the carbon fiber skin of the airframe. She traced each panel's shape with her thumb and middle finger, checking for new surface tension or changes in alignment. There hadn't been any in over a year. That didn't stop her. When she opened the side access panel, she looked at the coolant pressure regulator. Even though the lines had long since been bled, the metal hadn't corroded. A fine layer of oxidation shimmered faintly under the LED beam she used, but it hadn't eaten into the weld points. She wrote that down too. The aircraft never responded. No lights flickered. No servo hummed. Still, she moved as though someone, or something, was listening. Others worked around her now without bothering to ask why. The new crew chief had stopped assigning her other equipment. She didn't need orders to keep coming back. The hangar's work logs showed Maya logged more man-hours on the X-92 than the entire field team combined. Sometimes, during her mid-morning sweep, she sat on the concrete just beside the port landing strut and read through past entries. She flipped back through pages where she'd drawn minor fluctuations in panel spacing or inked small maps of wiring routes that no longer had power. These sketches were done with a precision more common to avionics techs than a structural mechanic. Nobody had taught her that, at least not officially. It was during one of those routines that Sergeant Timmons caught sight of her resting her palm along the aircraft's leading edge. He'd come looking for a torque wrench he'd lent to Bay 4 and noticed her through the gaps in the caution tape. His boots echoed in the space as he called out to her. Some joke about romancing the junkyard. She didn't flinch or turn. He walked closer, watching the way her hand slid down the wing like she was trying to hear something beneath the surface. "You think this scrap pile's gonna fly again?" She paused, just long enough to decide he deserved an answer. "My father said it would." When the time was right, Timmons blinked. The silence afterward was heavier than it should have been. He muttered something about weirdos and walked off. Maya didn't respond. She just went back to logging fuselage strain readings. That moment didn't change anything about her routine, but it clarified something. The aircraft mattered more to her than explaining did. She didn't need anyone else to understand. She knew the metal's weight by heart. She recognized the shift in light on the paint when the sun rose over the ridge at 7:40. She could tell when the hangar's humidity control lagged even by a few minutes. To everyone else, it was a relic. To her, it was still becoming. She never opened the main canopy. Regulations locked it down, and the sealant had fused over the years. But once a week, she knelt under the nose and checked the hydraulic control lines feeding into the retractable landing gear. Nobody had ordered that. There was no entry in the TO requiring a field mechanic to test those lines on a non-operational prototype. She did it anyway. Her inspection rounds included visual checks on the turbine access panels, the bleed air ducts, and the auxiliary power unit interface. None of it was powered. Still, she verified alignment, gasket compression, and thermal stress indicators. All of it logged in rows of tight block letters under the date and time. By 17 o'clock, when the other mechanics clocked out or joked about heading to the DFAC, Maya was still cleaning her tools. She wiped the lens of her inspection camera with alcohol and checked the battery level. She arranged her sensor probes in a foam-lined tray. Every piece had a place. Before she left, she walked once around the X-92. No checklist, just one slow circuit from nose to tail, the way you check a sleeping child or a campfire you don't trust to stay out. Then she zipped the notebook closed and placed it in the tray, top left corner, under the edge of her torque wrench set. When she pulled the tarp back over the fuselage, she didn't yank or toss it like the others did. She rolled it forward edge by edge, smoothing out each fold until the jet disappeared again beneath the canvas. She turned off the portable light rig and let the hangar fall back into its dull yellow hue. As she walked out, her boots moved silently between the concrete seams. She didn't look back. The others might forget. She wouldn't. At 14:16 local time, the first surge hit. Monitors across the base flickered, then dropped into black. The air traffic radars at Tower B spun uselessly, broadcasting static into empty air. Inside Hangar 7, the emergency lights blinked on, casting orange halos across the tool benches and shadowed fuselages. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then the noise returned, not from machines, but from voices rising as screens rebooted and alarms sounded out of sync. The solar flare that struck Earth's magnetosphere that afternoon was one of the strongest recorded in 15 years. Its electromagnetic pulse didn't cause direct damage, but it overloaded power regulators and pushed unsecured systems into reset. Backup generators kicked in after a 60-second delay. By then, base-wide servers had already defaulted to fail-safe protocols. By 14:20, internal comms were back online, though the network remained in degraded mode. Technicians across logistics, maintenance, and command were instructed to manually verify data integrity from all systems affected. The hangars were lowest on the priority list, but within Hangar 7 something slipped through the net. Senior systems analyst Peterson was reviewing the automated maintenance logs on a secondary console when he saw it. Buried under a stack of auto-generated error flags and inspection recurrences, an alert had populated in the Air Logistics database under Aircraft ID, X92, PH04. Status: overdue inspection. Date last logged: the 11th of March, 2004. He leaned closer. The entry wasn't created that day. It had simply surfaced again, reactivated by a legacy process that hadn't run in nearly 2 decades. The timestamp read 14 hours, 22 minutes, and 7 seconds. He cross-checked the aircraft number against the decommissioned list. It wasn't there. By 14:30, the anomaly reached Flight Maintenance Command. Captain Lerner scanned the alert history and shook his head. The Phantom Hawk had no current assignment, no pilot roster, and no stored operational schematics. The system shouldn't even recognize it. Security protocols reverted to archival baselines had inadvertently unlocked several directories tied to early development files. The X92 designation buried under 20 years of phased-out formats registered as valid due to an old patch that hadn't been removed from the legacy server. At 14:38, a sync loop kicked in. All flagged aircraft received an automated dispatch notice. Even aircraft long retired, like a broken C-130 in Storage Yard 2, were listed as needing physical confirmation. But the X92 didn't just get listed. It triggered a Priority 2 inspection alert because of its classification as an experimental platform. That alone prompted escalation. Within minutes, 3 officers and 2 senior techs were assigned to respond. Confusion rippled through the room. Lieutenant Keats, reading from the console, asked why a project labeled Black Beta AE classified under defunct R&D was active in their region. Sergeant Rayner shrugged. He thought the X92 had been scrapped. Nobody had a clear answer. What made it worse was that the maintenance log for the aircraft, though inactive, showed consistent data entries: temperatures, humidity levels, component notations. Someone had been maintaining the file manually. They traced the entries to a user ID registered under a Tier 2 mechanic clearance. It matched Maya Alvarez. By 15:20, Chief Warrant Officer Grant arrived at Hangar 7 with a mobile diagnostics unit and a 3-person systems crew. The team carried standard interface kits for both current-gen and legacy aircraft, including adaptable cables, multi-port readers, and encryption scramblers designed for cold-locked flight computers. The X92's panel didn't accept any of them. Grant crouched beside the auxiliary bay and removed the panel housing. The connector ports were non-standard, labeled with shorthand identifiers no longer used in any current tech manuals. When he ran a universal adapter through the primary data bus, the system rejected the handshake 3 times before shorting the device's fuse. They pulled back. He switched to passive scan mode and ran a signature trace. The aircraft pinged with residual charge in 2 nodes, but failed to identify as a known platform. No power draw registered. The onboard systems were either fried or offline by design. Grant initiated a Level 2 physical diagnostic, checking voltage levels at each accessible point. Everything was dormant. At 16:10, He tried a side-channel method, using a portable encryption bypass module, a tool usually used on scrapped ISR drones for recovery training. The device recognized the presence of encryption, but it wasn't layered in any known U.S. Air Force or DARPA sequence. Instead, it returned an unknown protocol string, Ghostlink, AZ-001. Grant tapped the side of the console in frustration. He called for Tech Sergeant Foley to pull archived manuals for anything labeled Ghostlink, but nothing turned up. The name didn't exist in the Air Force's current database. It wasn't just obsolete, it was erased. By 17 o'clock, 2 more teams had tried to brute force access the X-92's command core using line injectors and bypass firmware, both unsuccessful. Each attempt caused minor feedback loops that risked damaging the avionics. When a port shorted during the last scan, Grant ordered all further attempts suspended. He filed a systems lock report at 17:23, logging the aircraft as permanently inoperable due to non-standard architecture and irretrievable access protocols. The report noted that no override commands were available, no physical redundancies identified, and no biometric access systems recognized. In the post-attempt debrief, Grant summarized it plainly. They were trying to wake a machine that had no interest in responding. Whatever the X-92 had been built for, it wasn't designed to be restarted by anyone without the original key, and nobody had seen that key in 2 decades. His final note, dictated into the secure comms log before leaving the hangar, carried more resignation than protocol. This thing doesn't want to wake up. And maybe that's the point. At 0:17, the main security lights at Hangar 7 dropped to half power for nightly energy conservation. The cameras remained active, but their blind spots were well documented by anyone who had worked the line long enough. Maya waited in the shadow of the northeast wall, behind a stack of flight pallets that hadn't been moved since the fall inventory cycle. She checked her watch. The next patrol wasn't due for 13 minutes. She moved without hesitation, her boots silent against the concrete. Her badge gave her limited access, but she didn't need more than that. The security door clicked open on the second swipe. She slipped through before it fully disengaged, pulling it gently shut behind her to avoid triggering the internal latch tone. Inside the hangar, the X-92 sat under tarp and silence, exactly as it had for years. Maya walked straight to it, setting her leather notebook down on the maintenance cart she'd pushed into place days earlier. She didn't turn on the overhead lights. Instead, she used a narrow-beam inspection flashlight with a red filter lens, clipped low on her collar. The beam swept across the aircraft's forward underbelly until it stopped at a small panel no larger than a clipboard. The auxiliary hatch was sealed without hinges or screws, flush with the fuselage. Most assumed it was decorative or sealed permanently. Maya pressed her left thumb into a groove no one else had noticed. A soft click followed. The cover shifted, just enough to slip 2 fingers beneath and pull it away. Behind it, a port unlike any used in standard military aircraft waited in the dark. She reached into her tool pouch and removed a cable connector wrapped in cloth. It looked handmade. The cable slid into the port without resistance. A brief flicker of static light blinked through the sleeve, then faded. She opened her notebook to a page marked only with a date and a long alphanumeric string. Her fingers moved over the portable keypad, 1 keystroke at a time. She didn't pause to double-check. The sequence had lived in her memory long before it was ever written down. MAV 2047XZ1. She hit enter. Nothing happened for exactly 7 seconds. Then a soft pulse ran through the airframe. No lights, no fans, no alarms. Just a low-frequency vibration, the kind a trained mechanic would feel more than hear. She placed her palm on the hull, above the port. The surface was warm. The tarp shifted slightly from internal pressure equalizing. Somewhere deep inside, a system had acknowledged her presence. Maya stayed motionless. She waited to see if anything would reset or reject her input. When nothing did, she removed the cable and resealed the hatch. The panel clicked back into place. You couldn't tell it had been touched. She tucked the notebook back into her chest pocket and returned the flashlight to her collar clip. One last glance at the aircraft, and then she moved toward the service exit. She didn't smile, but her breath had changed. Slower, steadier. She hadn't come to fix something. She'd come to wake it. At 0:24, the lights inside the X-92's cockpit flickered once, then steadied. The displays, long thought dead, blinked through boot sequences that hadn't run in nearly 20 years. One by one, the instrument panels illuminated, casting a soft blue hue across the glass canopy from within. Shadows played across the control surfaces, reflecting the gentle hum of power returning. Maya stood still at the base of the nose strut, watching through the curved glass. She hadn't touched anything since typing the sequence. The system responded to her proximity as if it had been waiting for her, as if the dormant code inside recognized something only it could measure. The main HUD faded in, no longer black. A string of status checks ran across it, followed by a phrase in amber text. Identity confirmed. "Welcome back, little hawk." The words didn't scroll or strobe. They simply stayed there, centered, warm against the cool glow of the panel. Maya took one step forward, barely audible on the concrete. Inside the aircraft, low-frequency systems powered on. The avionics modules completed internal diagnostics without user input. Onboard processors activated thermal regulation circuits, pressurizing the flight deck to pre-flight equilibrium. Data flashed across the side monitors. Life support, targeting modules, power distributional running simulations without prompt. She moved closer to the cockpit. The aircraft didn't just acknowledge her presence. It oriented to her, recalibrating sensor alignment to match her physical location on the floor. Landing lights along the gear struts blinked in alternating rhythm. Not random, deliberate. Like a greeting. No alarms sounded. No external comms were tripped. The jet was waking up silently, like an animal that had been asleep so long it forgot what it meant to stretch. She laid her hand on the side of the fuselage again. The surface, now warm to the touch, responded with a low resonance. It wasn't mechanical vibration, it was deeper. Like the hull recognized her fingerprint not by ridge but by intent. More data streamed on the HUD. Not technical logs, not preset flight charts, visuals, wireframe outlines of her own sketches designs she had drawn in childhood for fun, based on puzzles her father once gave her. The aircraft was replaying memory through function. Inside the canopy, one final message appeared beneath the welcome line, activating Ghostlink Core. Then, in smaller text, rendered in her father's old system font, "Your mind built this interface. Your presence reboots it." Maya lowered her head, resting her forehead against the edge of the nose cone. Her eyes stayed closed for several seconds. The aircraft wasn't just a machine. It had been waiting for her. By 8:10 the next morning, Maya Alvarez was seated in an operations debriefing room on the north end of Bagram, directly beneath the secure server floor. The table was steel, the chairs molded plastic, and the air held the stale sharpness of overused HVAC. Across from her sat 4 officers in Class A uniforms, their rank insignia polished, their expressions unreadable. The system logs from the X-92 had triggered a base-wide alert at 3:27. Command scrambled the 513th security response flight, and Maya was found standing beside the now active aircraft, calm and cooperative. She surrendered her tools, badge, and notebook without hesitation. She didn't resist questioning. She didn't volunteer much either. By 9 o'clock, a Level 4 investigation had been launched. Over the next 48 hours, military intelligence teams combed through archived records, some stored on physical drives that hadn't been touched since the early 2000s. Deep in a classified R&D index, under a now-defunct project titled Hawksphere X, they found a personnel file that hadn't been referenced since 2004. Dr. Enrique Alvarez, civilian contractor, aerospace systems engineer, clearance, top secret, affiliation, DARPA and USAF, experimental flight group. His name was listed as lead systems integrator for the X-92 Phantom Hawk prototype. His final recorded involvement ended abruptly on the 14th of March 2004. The official reason: violation of chain, of command protocols, and refusal to disclose full technical documentation regarding embedded learning systems. Further review unearthed a sealed disciplinary file containing testimony from 2 project officers and a single memo to Air Force Material Command. The memo stated Dr. Alvarez had developed an adaptive learning core using a human behavioral model without formal approval. When pressed to reveal its structure, he refused. The behavioral model, according to internal notes, was based on long-term neurocognitive mapping from his daughter, Maya. The AI schema used a technique not seen in military applications at the time. Instead of programming logic trees and decision matrices, Alvarez had constructed something different. He had fed the aircraft system with years of cognitive data collected through exercises, puzzles, and interactive simulations, all designed for Maya between the ages of 6 and 10. The investigation team reviewing this didn't speak for several minutes after reading it. By 11:42, those findings reached Brigadier General McClendon, who ordered a full review of all test footage, developer logs, and closed-door hearing transcripts. Several files contained footage of Alvarez defending his work, calmly insisting that the goal was not to create artificial intelligence. It was to create intelligence shaped by someone human, someone grounded, someone familiar. When Maya was asked directly during her follow-up interrogation how long she'd known about her father's involvement, she answered without hesitation, "Since I was 8. He told me this plane would fly again when the right person asked it to." The officers didn't interrupt her. She wasn't insubordinate, she was precise. In a sealed envelope, stored in the lining of her notebook, investigators found a letter. It was addressed simply, "To Little Hawk." The letter outlined her father's belief that innovation should never be buried because others feared what they didn't understand. That someday, someone would need to remind the Air Force that vision isn't always loud. Sometimes it speaks through what it leaves behind. The panel read every word, and none of them questioned whether the aircraft had responded to her. They only wondered how they had ever forgotten who built it. Inside the secure data lab beneath Operations Wing C, Maya stood before a terminal surrounded by engineers, command officers, and system specialists. The room was quiet, lit only by the ambient glow of monitors and the white pulse of cooling fans overhead. She didn't ask permission. She didn't wait for someone else to lead. She inserted a single drive, one she had carried in her personal toolkit for years, embedded inside a hardened inspection scanner. The system accepted the file immediately. No access errors, no conflict warnings, just a silent green confirmation light. On the main screen, the GhostLink core opened. Data filled the display: neural vectors, cognitive loops, problem-solving matrices. But it wasn't raw code. It was language shaped around behavior. The logs weren't system responses. They were responses to Maya. Every input over the past week had triggered familiar patterns buried in the learning subroutines. Lieutenant Owens scrolled through the logs, eyes narrowing. "These aren't flight algorithms." Maya stepped forward. "They're mine." She pointed to a sequence of looping simulations, rapid recalculations based on abstract puzzles, not standard airframes. She recognized them. They were based on drawings she used to make with her dad, sketches of impossible wings and landing gear that folded like puzzle pieces. They weren't designs. They were games, memory challenges, the kind her father used to turn into stories at bedtime. Major Delaney accessed a cross-reference in one of the recovered files and pulled up video footage dated the 9th of November 2003. A younger Maya sat at a white desk in a small lab room, stacking blocks while Dr. Enrique Alvarez adjusted a sensor grid behind her. She solved each puzzle with quiet focus. Each success was marked in the lower right corner with timestamps and input logs. Each movement was recorded in milliseconds. Thought pattern to action. For months, he had built a map of how she thought, how she adapted, how she compensated when a solution failed, her sense of balance, spatial logic, and cause and effect sequencing. All of it was copied, then filtered into the GhostLink core. The X-92 hadn't been programmed to follow instructions. It had been programmed to follow her. The room fell still. On screen, the simulation displayed a neural overlayon that matched Maya's current brain activity almost perfectly. The match ratio read 94.6%. No known pilot had ever reached above 70 on any system-integrated prototype. She watched the waveform shift with her breathing. "This isn't just a startup protocol," she said, quieter now. "It's not just a way to fly the aircraft. It's built to sync. It completes its learning cycles by responding to the way I solve problems." She turned to the officers. "It doesn't just follow me. It learns from me, and it evolves in real time." One of the engineers whispered under his breath, "It's not a flight system. It's a symbiosis." She looked up at the display, at the line of data still climbing in silent rhythm with her thoughts. "My dad didn't build the interface to match a pilot. He built it to match a person, and that person was me." By 7:45 the following morning, the X-92 Phantom Hawk had been moved to runway 3B under direct authorization from Air Combat Command. A temporary flight clearance had been issued for a single non-combat sortie. Weather was clear, wind negligible. Maya stood inside the prep bay of the flight line hangar, flanked by 2 flight surgeons and a systems technician. She had already signed the waiver. Her G-suit was a standard-issue CSU-17P model, normally worn for high-G training in the T-6 Texan II. The torso harness had been custom-fitted overnight, adjusted for her smaller frame, flight boots secured, gloves sealed. The flight line crew checked all harness points twice. No one made small talk. By 8:05, she walked the short distance from the hangar to the aircraft with slow, deliberate steps. A security perimeter kept all non-essential personnel back behind a safety barrier. More than 50 airmen and officers stood there in silence. Nobody had been ordered to watch. They just showed up. The X-92 stood at rest near the edge of the tarmac, canopy closed, power lines disconnected. Its matte black surface absorbed the sun instead of reflecting it. The thermal coating engineered for infrared reduction still intact after years of neglect. Its wings were down, flaps neutral. The aircraft looked asleep. Maya crossed the final 15 feet without hesitation. As she stepped within range, the aircraft responded. Landing lights along the undercarriage blinked in pattern. A low-frequency vibration rippled through the hull. Sensor panels rotated 2 degrees left, aligning with her approach vector. The aircraft wasn't starting up, it was waking up. She stopped beside the port intake and placed her palm against the embedded biometric scanner located on the canopy frame. It lit up beneath her hand, glowing with a blue pulse that matched her breathing pattern. The onboard system spoke through a speaker barely audible over the wind. Identity confirmed. The canopy lifted. It opened without a hiss, without a single servo grinding. Just smooth movement like muscle memory. The pilot seat adjusted automatically, sliding back and tilting to match her measured spinal curvature. The harnesses lifted, then settled, waiting for her. The aircraft recognized her weight before she sat. The foot pedals moved forward 4 centimeters. The HUD activated in standby mode, no external command needed. She placed both hands on the edge of the canopy rim and paused. No fanfare, no final checks. The ground crew remained silent. Then she climbed in. The moment her body settled into the seat, the canopy closed. No one moved. A systems specialist whispered to his partner, "That wasn't flight prep. That was a welcome." Inside the cockpit, Maya flexed her hands around the twin control sticks. The neural sync lines displayed full green. Ghostlink interface confirmed. AI systems idling, awaiting command. The aircraft didn't ask for flight parameters. It was already waiting for them. She glanced toward the control tower, where one red light turned green. The sky didn't know what was coming. But the aircraft did, and so did she. At 8:17, the X-92 Phantom Hawk lifted off runway 3B with no afterburner and no audible strain. The aircraft cleared 3,000 feet in under 12 seconds, its climb profile registering at 85 degrees, well beyond standard training thresholds. Controllers in the tower scrambled to adjust radar tracking parameters. They weren't prepared for what came next. Maya eased into a high-angle roll at 10,000 feet, banking left with a pitch correction so precise the aircraft responded before her fingers moved. The Ghostlink didn't wait for instruction. It read her intent. Flight logs would later show a control latency of less than 0.02 seconds below human reaction time. At 12,800 feet, she initiated a vertical spiral climb. No HUD indicators required. The aircraft responded by trimming surface controls in real time, compensating for pressure differential without needing pre-programmed limits. The onboard systems adjusted thrust vectoring dynamically, matching her biofeedback rhythms logged during the first 90 seconds of flight. She leveled out at 18,000 feet and transitioned into a hard bank reversal, moving from a full starboard turn into an inverted dive. Typical military jets like the F-16 risk structural stress at such angles, but the X-92 held compression integrity at 5.6 Gs without error. Data logged this as well. The internal stabilizers were adapting to her decision cycle, evolving with every maneuver. By 8:23, she dropped to 6,500 feet over restricted airspace, then launched into a snap climb with a lateral roll and unlisted move no known aircraft had executed. The flight path plotted an upward spiral coupled with a downward counter-yaw, impossible under normal parameters. The aircraft didn't just handle it. It completed the movement and smoothed the exit arc, reducing drag and heat signature by 32% in real time. On the ground, analysts in the flight monitoring room began comparing the telemetry to theoretical simulations run during the original X-92 testing phase. Maya was exceeding them by 40% in 3 performance categories: response agility, energy conservation, and maneuver latency. Inside the cockpit, she wasn't flying with effort. She was thinking, and the aircraft was responding before thought became motion. At 8:27, she climbed past 22,000 feet in under 12 seconds, initiated a rolling corkscrew descent, and leveled at 14,000 feet with a clean stall recovery. The aircraft realigned power distribution across all primary flight surfaces, mid-maneuver, bypassing preset safety limits that would normally require ground approval. The Ghostlink interface wasn't just observing, it was writing new limits. Maya touched the trim control once. The aircraft responded with a thrust modification that had not been programmed. It compensated, not predicted. It learned. As she leveled out over the southern ridge, the onboard system broadcast a system note, not verbal. Just one line across the lower HUD. Sync level, 100%. Adaptive state, active. Teaching mode, initiated. The aircraft wasn't being piloted anymore. It was becoming a partner. And for the first time in 2 decades, the X-92 wasn't a relic. It was alive. By 9:12, the X-92 taxied to a silent stop on the edge of the tarmac. Its surface showed no heat distortion, no structural fatigue. Technicians waited at a safe distance, uncertain whether to approach. When the canopy lifted, Maya sat motionless for 3 full seconds. Then she stepped out with the same calm that marked every day she'd spent in Hangar 7. No applause, no announcement. But the moment she touched the ground, the perimeter crowd stepped back, not from protocol, but from reverence. By 10 o'clock, she was escorted to a secure conference room in Wing Delta, where Brigadier General McClendon, along with 2 command advisors and an operations liaison from Wright-Patterson, offered her a direct commission. They promised her a pathway through test pilot school, a full-grade promotion, and a permanent advisory role on the reactivation of the Ghostlink program. She listened. She didn't interrupt. When they finished, she said no. She didn't say it with defiance. She said it the way someone finishes a thought they've carried too long. I didn't do this for a career. She looked at McClendon, then at the image of the X-92 frozen on the briefing screen behind him. I did it because someone needed to prove he wasn't reckless. He wasn't unstable. He just believed too much in something no one else understood. They asked her to reconsider. They listed honors, citations, long-term benefits, but her answer didn't shift. By 14 o'clock, she was cleared to return to duty. That night, Maya walked back into Hangar 7 wearing the same uniform she always had. No medals, no new insignia, just the same red toolkit and leather notebook. As she passed through the entry, someone had hung a hand-painted sign on the inside wall, just above her workstation. Home of the mechanic who taught a machine how to dream. She didn't stop to look at it long. She nodded once and kept walking. The other techs in the hangar didn't say much, but something had changed. Where there used to be quiet glances and half-said jokes, there was now a space held open. Not fear, not fame, just acknowledgement. A kind of understanding only shared between people who know what it feels like to be underestimated for so long that silence becomes armor. One of the junior airmen from Bay 2 walked up to her as she unpacked her sensor reader. He said he'd seen her fly, that it didn't make sense what he saw, but it made him want to try harder. He didn't have a question, just that one sentence. Then he walked away. By 18:30, Maya had recalibrated 2 hydraulic testers, rewrapped her wire kits, and cleaned the grease traps on a derated avionics table. She never asked for anything else. She didn't need a new nameplate. She didn't want her own lab. She just wanted to keep fixing the things everyone else forgot about. The Ghostlink system would be studied for years. The X-92 would be flown again, tested by others. Manuals would be written. Panels would debate policy. But in the back of every file stamped classified, there would be one line no one could revise. System reactivated by Maya Alvarez. Civilian grade, E. Lima. Assignment, Hangar Tuju. Status, complete. 3 weeks after the flight, Maya Alvarez didn't show up for morning shift. No alarm was raised. She wasn't on the duty roster. There had been no formal orders, no transfer paperwork, no leave request, but by 6:12, someone noticed her toolbox hadn't moved. The sensor kit she always kept beside it was gone. Inside her cubby, the only thing left was a folded shop towel and a spare battery pack. Her supervisor, Tech Sergeant Bowman, walked over to her station at the end of the day. The bench was spotless. Wrenches aligned by size, calibration tags clipped in order, diagnostic cables coiled to spec. The floor had been swept. The wall socket covers were dusted. It looked like an inspection was coming, but none had been scheduled. Resting on the center of the bench was her leather notebook. Closed, zipper tucked. Bowman picked it up with the same care someone might give to something fragile. He opened it to the final page. The words were written in clean, even lines. She doesn't need me anymore. She's learned all I can teach her. Now she can teach others to dream as big as he did. Bowman didn't read it twice. He just nodded once and slipped the notebook into the evidence envelope, as required by protocol. But he didn't log it as evidence. He filed it under personal effects. At 21:45, a secondary inspection team, prepping for the next round of flight simulations, entered the X-92's flight bay. It had been parked beneath a controlled canopy, tethered to external power, in a section marked Flight Ready. The aircraft was clean, serviced, systems nominal. Inside the cockpit, they found her safety glasses folded neatly on the pilot's seat. They were scratched on one edge, the clear kind she always wore during thermal work. Just beside them, resting against the back panel, was a photograph. It showed a man in a gray lab coat standing beside an early prototype of the X-92. His hair was swept back, eyes tired but proud. In the bottom corner, faint ink had been written in slanted script. For Little Hawk, fly beyond fear. No other personal belongings were left behind. Her room in the barracks was clean, locker empty, key turned in. She didn't vanish. She left gently. The next week, the Ghostlink Squadron expansion was approved. 4 test platforms were greenlit, each one built with adaptive systems modeled on the same code her father had once been punished for creating. Civilian applications followed. Advanced air traffic control systems, adaptive medical response units, drone interface modules. But none of them performed like the X-92. None responded quite the same. Pilots who trained on the system said it was like trying to talk to someone who already had a best friend, like learning a language that had once been spoken to someone else in whispers. They called it the Little Hawk Standard. And though no one could confirm where Maya Alvarez had gone, a rumor started months later, that in a small aircraft depot near the New Mexico border, a civilian mechanic with quiet hands and a calm voice had been hired to rebuild old training jets for cadets. No one called her Maya there, but she always arrived early. She always checked the undercarriage herself. And every once in a while, someone would see her sitting under a wing at sundown, sketching something in a notebook that never left her side. Not aircraft specs, not schematics, just patterns, flow charts, possibilities. The kind a person draws when they remember something too big for words. Back at Bagram, the mechanics of Hangar 7 kept her name on the shift board for 3 months. Not because they thought she was coming back, but because you don't erase the name of the one who reminded everyone why they joined in the first place. She didn't need medals. She didn't need a statue. She had already built something that would outlast both. Long after her name faded from rosters and flight reports, Maya Alvarez's story still moved between hangars and briefings like a quiet current. No one made a documentary. No plaque was hung. But those who knew what happened kept telling it softly, without embellishment. The mechanic who brought back an aircraft the Air Force had buried. The woman who didn't ask for recognition but gave the service one of its most advanced technologies by simply doing what she'd always done: pay attention, stay steady, and listen to what others ignored. Her legacy didn't come from the flight log or the Ghostlink interface. It came from the message she left behind, written not in speeches but in silence, in habits, in the simple consistency of her work. Maya didn't unlock the X-92 by accident or luck. She did it because she never stopped believing that things left behind still mattered. Every base has someone like her, a name that doesn't get called first, a voice that stays low in meetings, a uniform that's always clean but never decorated. They show up early, double-check the torque, keep systems running that others forget to notice. They don't seek attention, they just fix what's broken. Maya reminded the military, and anyone paying attention, that breakthroughs don't always come from noise. Sometimes they come from routine, from the quiet discipline of those who don't need credit, from the people who leave things better than they found them because that's what they do. The engineers who redesigned Ghostlink protocols now train using her original interface pattern. Every new model references her decision-making during the test flight. The adaptive systems in use today, whether in aviation, emergency medical response, or search and rescue, carry traces of her logic, the way she saw the world. And none of it would have happened if she'd waited for permission. Maya never asked to lead a project. She never asked for command. She followed her father's maps, trusted her instincts, and showed the world that memory and machine can live together when guided by something human. Some say the X-92 was ahead of its time, but maybe it just arrived when the right person was ready to hear it. There's no way to measure the impact of someone like her. She didn't fit a standard. She didn't check all the boxes. But in the end, she did what so few do. She saw possibility where others saw waste. She kept faith in something no one else believed in. She brought a machine to life not by force, but by understanding. At bases around the country, some shops now have signs above their doors that say, "Honor the quiet ones." Not official, just something passed down. A reminder that some heroes don't give orders, they give effort. Some don't need rank to lead. And some wear coveralls, carry notebooks, and change the future just by showing up every day and refusing to forget what matters.